review and answer questions if you have any regarding the 419 rewrite that's been proposed, the legislation for this upcoming session in January. And I anticipate this meeting is going to be very short because I've gotten no emails and questions and preliminaries and suggestions for changes over the last 3 weeks. We're also going to have this legislation on the agenda for next week's regular meeting, which is on the 17th. That meeting, I'm very excited because we're going to have DCF roll out their new website, which is, I've talked to them several times and gone over the prototype. They have new software, and it's going to be really much more like Akka and much more user friendly. Susan, I know you're all aglow about that. And that's very exciting. We'll have some other, I see Michael here from Oxford, and I see Michael here from FAR. We'll be getting updates from FAR and Oxford next week, as well as the opioid overdose numbers in Palm Beach County. I don't anticipate we're going to get the 23 numbers from the state until probably late December, early January. But every indication is that that the opioid overdoses have basically I'll use the word improved, but it kind of bottomed out. I mean, it's probably down another 30%, but I'll have numbers for you from Palm Beach County next week. Again, if you're just signing on, this is going to be a very short meeting. We're only talking about the rewrite of Chapter 419, the community residences and recovery communities, to try to make it standardized in the state of Florida. I see Dan Lauber from Illinois is on, so if you have any questions, he's here to answer them as well. And again, I'm dispensing with any preliminaries today because this is just a specific meeting to answer any questions you might have regarding the legislation. It's already in draft writing in the Senate. I anticipate hopefully within a week or two we're going to get a Senate bill, and our sponsor in the Senate is Gail Harrell, and I'm hoping that Darrell Rousson will be a co-sponsor on the Democratic side. So this is a little more informal today. I'm going to just open it up to just, ask a basic question. Does anybody have any questions? We're going to put the legislation, the template right now. Does anybody have any questions, any need for clarifications regarding the bill proposal to rewrite 419?
Hi, Al. This is Jill Singer.
Yes, hi, Jill.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So I noticed on page 16, I actually started highlighting a couple of things, but on line 461, it says nothing in this section prohibits a local government from adopting less restrictive zoning for siting. Should that be less or more?
Less restrictive means that if a community wants to do away with any kind of spacing distance, for example, and allow all applicants to be permitted uses, that's just an example. They can do that because it's less restrictive.
Okay.
This is kind of a floor, like it's 4 and 4
Okay.
written as a floor.
Okay, I got it.
Just in general, in general, 419 is very flawed. It was written 40 years ago, maybe more. It doesn't even consider recovery residences in 419. They're not covered. So we have a gaping hole there. And in many ways, and I can let Dan give you a couple of examples, but in many ways, the current statute violates federal law, patently violates federal law. So does that answer your question, Jill?
It does, and I probably reversed the floor versus the ceiling in my mind when I was going through this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. One other thing, I noticed substance abuse is noted. Is there a way to, are we keeping that language there intentionally, or do we want to use substance use versus abuse?
Florida statutes uses substance abuse. They've
Okay,
changed. I mean, we've all changed. We've all moved forward, but the legislation hasn't caught up with it.
okay,
It's been duly noted, and maybe next year we just need to look at all the places where it says substance abuse and maybe try to clean it up and because the parlance now, as you know, is
yeah,
substance use disorder,
right.
and not substance abuse because of the pejorative nature of that term. It's in
Exactly.
statute right now. Houston Park, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't think we can make changes on that right away, but I think that's a really good point. And I've actually even gotten away from using substance use disorder, and I refer to it when I'm working with groups as substance use dependency because labeling it as a disorder is, to me, derogatory to patients. And I think by saying that there's a substance use dependency
Hmm.
is more friendly, but that's just my opinion. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah,
I
no,
like
that's
that
that's a
language.
good point. That's an excellent point. It's kind of like Webster's dictionary. It doesn't change overnight. Uh, um, but we all recognize, everybody on this meeting, I'm sure recognizes that there's some archaic language in legislation. Um, what we've always tried to do, what I've always tried to do is look from 10,000 feet and what's the effect? I mean, let's make the changes where they're really going to make the biggest impact. But Houston, I agree. Jill, I agree.
Okay.
Using using those terms is pejorative. It does have a negative connotation.
But
Um,
I understand, and I don't disagree. However, if you
hey,
look at
Dr. Needle, hi,
DSM,
how are you?
I sorry, the DSM or the ICD-9, I mean, you're going to see substance use disorder, right? That is the classification for what it is. So, that's not going to change, probably.
So what we can look at the statute as we go along. Once staff does their thing, see how many times we can make a note of how many times substance abuse is in there, and maybe we can start changing it to substance use disorder or substance use dependency. Um, that's something, it just came up today, and I mean, we have discussed it in the past, but hey, why not? If we're going to do an amendment anyway, maybe we can just amend that out and change, and because it starts, wherever we start, that's where we start. I'm not sure, and I'm sorry that Jeff Lynn he's got other commitments. He may tune in, um, but I'll have to look to see if it's defined as substance use disorder in 397. What is it, 311, the definition section? Can't do that now. Don't have time, but I'll take a look to see if that's where we have to start to try to amend that in a more omnibus legislation and get language that fits today as opposed to 40 years ago. Any other hands? Again, uh, you know, any other concerns? And again, we're going to be talking about this as one agenda item next week on the 17th. So you can certainly go back and read this again. And if you have any questions, um, I'm hoping next week, maybe, but maybe not, to have a draft from the Senate staff, but we'll see. Anybody want to make any comments about the legislation, about the process? Because I'm going to go into another phase of, before we break, the meeting, to discuss how are we going to get support. There are a lot of groups out there. There's mental health associations. Um, we've got the 180 group that I've been talking to that deals with community residences. Um, Number one, we need to find a House sponsor for the bill. Number two, we need to let everybody know this is there so that groups can support it in Tallahassee when the legislative session begins, and use their lobbyists to help support this. Terrell, I see your hand is up. Terrell Pyburn, municipal attorney for Coconut Creek.
Hi, Al. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I just wanted to say that I looked at 397, 311, and it does reference substance use disorder, but it also references substance abuse throughout that section. So we probably could change it. We'll just have to make sure that whatever we change it to is consistent throughout.
This might be a next year thing where we just hunker down and review all of 397 and make the changes in all places at once. And see if, see if we can get some traction. Okay, well, thank you for that, Terrell. Anyone else regarding just the legislation, and then we can move on to brainstorm a little bit about how we can promote this and get various groups involved so that we have some traction from stakeholders. Any other comments? And this
Yeah.
is not the last word. We can come back in.
No worries. I should make it back to the office unless I get delayed.
Is this
Or
Uta?
at least a
Hi,
couple
Uta.
hours.
Are you talking to us or are you just unmuted?
I am just unmuted. So sorry.
That's okay. No problem. Always good to hear from you. Okay, so let's move on. Does anybody have, and we can again discuss this on the 17th, any ideas as to various groups? You can email me, suggestions, or email the groups themselves and have them contact or reach out to me. Because we do need to get some stakeholders to actually not only know about this, but to actively support us. Dan, you've got your hand up. Go ahead. Dan Lauber,
Yeah.
Illinois attorney who's been in this space, the community residence and zoning space for 50 years.
Yeah, I've been making contact with Collier County's NAMI executive director. That's the National Alliance for Mental Illness. My brother knows her. And I think that's a good starting point. Their state conference, frustratingly, is next week, which would have been a great time to get word out about this, but I don't know if that's really feasible. But they have about 23 chapters throughout the state. I am sure there's also an association in the state for people with supporting people with developmental disabilities. There's probably at least one for people with physical disabilities. I'm sure there are some organizations supporting people who are aging. So, if some people could go about taking on the challenge of identifying these, that would be really, really helpful. I'll work on the American Planning Association's Florida chapter. They do engage in lobbying, and there's of course all the different disabilities, plus possibly AARP. Who knows?
AFE is what?
AARP, American Association of Retired Persons. They have
Okay.
a Florida chapter, and I think
AARP,
they might be
okay, gotcha.
interested. There's got to be an association of operators of assisted living facilities, the small assisted living facilities that would, of course, benefit from this legislation.
Okay, and just to be definitive, when you say assisted living facilities, you're talking about community residences and not medical dependent facilities.
Right. The small ones, up to 12 people roughly, that are not medical facilities. Yeah.
Okay. And I believe, Terrell, you and I are going to be at the League of Cities Planning meeting on the 26th in Orlando,
Yes, correct.
answering questions about the bill. This would be general stuff. Dan, they're going to want to probably do a Zoom with you sometime in the future so they can ask you technical questions. And I know in speaking to Dan, Illinois has the very same type of bill that was presented last year and almost passed, and will probably be presented this year in terms of community residences throughout the state of Illinois. So, this is, we're not alone in this, and I think we've got some good support. And I'm happy to say that the League of Cities and the Association of Counties are receptive to the idea of making the standard. And one of the benefits is of your work, Dan, is we have probably 10 or so municipalities and counties in Florida that already have adopted a similar type of ordinance that this is a template for. And so I'm very optimistic that we're going to get some traction on this. Yes, Michael Schlossman from FAR, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Al. I know we're past the Q&A. I was having some problems with my internet. Can I ask two questions, or should I wait till the end?
Two questions for what?
For the legislation.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean this is not a normal meeting where we're formally going through agenda items. Now we're in a just a discussion phase of, how do we gain support for the legislation? So go ahead.
Oh, sure. When we talk about the definition of family being at 12, how does that apply to, say, a provider who owns an apartment building? And I just wanted to clarify, it's per dwelling, which would be per apartment. Is that correct?
Dan, I'm going to open it up to you for you to answer this.
Okay, the language speaks of as a permitted use. No more than 12 individuals occupy the proposed community residence. So if you've got, say, a two flat or duplex, as you call it in Florida, that's one functions as one extended family, you can have 12 people between the two units as of right. If you want to have more, that's when you go through what amounts to a reasonable accommodation, case by case review to have more than 12 people. If it's a recovery community, there's no limit on the number of people in the recovery community.
So an apartment complex could be in a recovery community. Is there any issue with the fact that they're adjacent to each other, these apartments? Yeah, I mean, that is one of the flashpoints here in terms of the economic model of some level 4 programs, regarding having multiple units. So insofar as apartments are concerned, so say you have a condo with 50 units in the condo, can that be a recovery community?
Yes, absolutely. It could be 2 or 3 single family homes adjacent to each other. It could be townhouses. It could be duplexes or triplexes, quadruplexes, multifamily housing. Those all would be permitted as recovery communities as of right, as long as they're outside of the applicable spacing distance and they have FAR certification.
So say a three level high rise that is all one provider that has I don't know, 6 units on each floor. So there's 18 units. So how would the definition of family work as a matter of right with something like that?
It wouldn't be applicable. That would be a recovery community.
Okay.
The limit of 12 people, again, that's just to be a permitted use. Applies solely to community residences. It does not apply to recovery communities.
Is there, do you feel that the language is tight enough that a municipality wouldn't be able to argue that it's not a recovery community based on some loophole?
I think it's pretty
We have
darn
a lot of
tight.
providers like that, so I just want to make sure that this works.
Yeah, I think it's pretty darn tight. So far, we've been using defining recovery communities starting with Pompano Beach, the second city I worked with in Florida. So we've got about a dozen. And so far, I have not heard any reports from any of them having difficulties understanding the difference.
Okay, like for instance, if one of the apartments in a 36 unit building was, say, not a recovery residence, they were renting to just ordinary folks, would that ruin the definition of recovery community?
As it's currently written, I believe, well, I think as it's currently written, yes, because we're saying the units are not held out to the general public.
Okay. Is there a way to tighten that?
I welcome any suggestions. If you can give some thought to that.
The majority of units are not held out to the general public is just one idea. I know that's a low bar.
Yeah, I think we need something tighter than that.
Mhm.
Um,
And can we specifically address that issue on the 17th? So give it
Okay.
some thought
Sure.
and maybe come up with some language, because I see the problem. Um, you know, you own an apartment building, but there's one person who's, got a rental agreement or
Right.
owns or says a condominium, and you've got 18 units, and one of them is not a community residence. Economically, you know. Now, of course, you can always do it as a reasonable accommodation, right?
we really haven't thought about this. Michael, if you could call me before next week's meeting, let's talk this out so I
Okay.
can get a better handle of what the
Yeah,
situation.
and this is a common scenario, both on the fact pattern that Al gave, and also you have some landlords that want to withhold some apartments and lease to the general public. Maybe they can get a better rate, whatever the deal is. I've run across this situation many times, and so I was curious how this would work definitionally when a municipality is looking at this and they say, well, it's not a community residence because one of them is rented out to the public.
I got it. I got it.
Okay.
The way recovery community is defined is basically the operator of the recovery community is not offering units to the general public. So in those instances where that you just described, where the landlord is renting a bunch of units to
Okay.
recovery community and then some to general public, it's a recovery community still.
Got it. Okay. Fair enough.
All right.
The other question I have, Al, this issue of mental health housing that's come up in our conversations with Palm Beach County and Tallahassee. I remember there was some language in here that one of the exemptions would be if there is currently no certification provided for it. And since there's no certification currently for mental health housing, how do we prevent this from proliferating flop houses that are pretending to be mental health houses even more?
Okay. Yeah, I've been thinking about this, Michael, for a while. I know you have.
Mhm.
I may even put it on the agenda, but I'll talk to you about that for next week
Okay.
to discuss. Dan, I don't know if you have been apprised of this, but there are some people, and I'm not going to accuse anybody of trying to fly under the radar, but we do have the issue of comorbidity, where you may have mental health issues, behavioral issues on that are not substance use disorder, or you can have dual diagnose.
Yeah.
And some of the houses, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, are trying to avoid certification or licensing um, by saying, "Hey, we're a mental health house, and there is no agency because we don't offer medical assistance. We're just a living place. That we should be accommodated because there's no license. Because as you know, the legislation says if there's no license available, you have certain rights." I see Lissa's got her hand up, and then Dan, always know your body language, and you have something to say as well. But I'll go Lissa first because she raised her hand first. Lissa
Um,
Franklin.
going on the part of it being a comorbidity issue, I don't think that's really the problem. It falls more along the lines of their skirting. They don't want to get the certification, because they can't get certification. Like for instance, Delray started cracking down on them. So as it happened before, everybody just moves north or south. And there's providers in Boynton right now that you've previously arrested for patient brokering that have these houses, and they're not even being quiet about it. because they're posting on the Cash Only Halfway Facebook group, being like, "We have beds available." And one of them I know just got their house shut down in Delray. Who you had arrested for running a lab out of a furniture store, in Delray Beach. Just to
Okay,
make everybody aware.
thank you. That's great intel, and that is the crux of the problem. So Dan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, we've got this covered. You have to have a license or certification or Oxford House Charter to be a permitted use. If there is a license available or certification available and you don't get it, you're not allowed under the zoning. Pure and simple. If there is no license or certification available for your type of use, like the group homes for people with eating disorders, then you have to go through the case-by-case review and show that you will provide the same protections for the residents that licensing ordinarily provides, and show that you will basically be operating in accord with what licensing would require. So these operators that you're describing would be in violation of the zoning ordinances. They could not get zoning approval if a license or certification is available.
That's a great, wow, that's a great point because Michael, um, uh, as not a permitted use, and they would have to go through the reasonable accommodation realm. They would have to show that they have at least the protections that FAR offers, because there's an affinity or a kinship between the two. Because as Lissa probably can verify, yeah, they're calling themselves mental health residences, community residences, but there's there is a SUD involved. So this is actually a reason to get this statute passed.
Right.
For the protection of the communities. And Terrell, if you want to chime in, this is not a one-way piece of legislation. This is a piece of legislation that protects both municipalities and counties and people who are living with disabilities in group homes. It's kind of a balance between the two. The good neighbor policy that FAR has, for example. The municipalities who have enacted this type of an ordinance, they don't get the complaints that they used to get. And that's why the League of Cities is interested in supporting this. And I see Michael McKee, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you explain section 7 a little bit? Is it required that the operator ask the municipality or city if they're within that spacing distance of another community residence? Is it required that they go through that process in each and every circumstance?
Well, before I hand it over to Dan, I'm going to do the layman's answer, which is they've already got to go if they're within the spacing distance, no matter what kind of residence it is. They'll have to go for a reasonable accommodation. And there are rules and that the municipalities have to follow. But if a municipality, does not have any kind of requirements, for residences that act as a family, in terms of they don't have a cap on unrelated adults, there is no spacing distance. But right now, and Dan, you can tell me if I'm correct on this, if they're within 660 feet, right now with 419, it would be within 1,000 feet. And within 500 feet of a residential community, if it's a multi-family district. But right now, 419, well, it doesn't even include recovery residences, but at this point. But right now, everything's a reasonable accommodation. But Dan, go ahead and can you button up what I just said?
Yeah, if section 7 is there to assure that the cities will provide the information to the operator of a proposed community residence or recovery community that they need to know whether or not they're a permitted use. So the first provision basically gives this, the operator submits an application, or they can request. They could ask the city, am I within a spacing distance of an existing community residence recovery community? It gives the city 10-day business days to get back to them, let them know if they're within the spacing distance or not. If they're not within a spacing distance and they're certified or licensed and don't have more than 12 people, they're a permitted use. That's the end of the application process, except for whatever regular zoning processes there are. If they're within a spacing distance, then the rest of the provision requires the city in a very timely fashion to give them all the information they need to show whether or not they comply with the standards to be allowed on a case-by-case basis, whether the city uses a special use permit or Palm Beach County's type 2 waiver or a special exception or a dedicated reasonable accommodation process. So this whole provision is intended to require the cities and the counties to provide the information the operator needs. One, whether or not they're outside of a spacing distance, in which case they're in if they meet the licensing and 12 cap. And two, if they're within a spacing distance, the information they need to show that they meet the standards to be allowed.
Okay, Michael, does that answer your question? Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
It essentially codifies what the cities I've worked with in Florida are doing, but I don't think we can rely on them cities just doing the right thing. We needed to codify it for the legislation.
Well, it only makes sense because if you're going to locate, say Oxford House is going to locate, you really have to have that information to know whether you have to go for a reasonable accommodation or, as Dan said, you're in as a permitted use. So rather than have Oxford House have to go through all the tortures to get the information, this requires the municipality or the county to give that information so you know where you stand.
Yeah,
I understand. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
If I may add, in some jurisdictions in Arizona, for example, this information is actually posted on maps online. I don't know if there's something in Florida law that would prohibit a city or county from doing that in Florida, but they're doing it there, so operators are actually able to identify if they're within a spacing distance just by going online to the city's geographic information system. But the key thing is that the experience of the cities that have adopted this sort of zoning in Florida and Arizona and elsewhere in the country has been that they get very few requests to locate within a spacing distance because the operators are able to find suitable locations outside of a spacing distance. And in most instances, the operators don't want to be clustering on the same block as an existing home. That said, you need to be aware if, as Al mentioned, if the locality's definition of family doesn't place a cap on the number of unrelated people that constitute a family, or doesn't have a definition of family, or a proposed community residence fits within the cap on the number of unrelated people that constitutes a family, it's a family, and none of this court statute applies to them at all. They're just got to be treated the same as any other family. And we make it clear in the bill that those that are families cannot be counted towards spacing distances. They're just a family. That's based on the overwhelming case law, court decisions.
I've always been, I forget to ask this question, and I'm going to include Terrell and you, Dan, in your study, in putting that together, or Terrell, in your experience, are there like a large minority of municipalities that have no definition of family, or have no cap on unrelateds. I've always tried to wrap my head around, because there's no problem at all in citing wherever you want to go if there's no definition of family or no cap on unrelated adults living as a family. So I don't know if it's yay or nay in your experience. Dan, I'll ask you first, and Terrell maybe back.
There's relatively few cities that don't place a cap on the number of unrelated people. They rely on the Supreme Court's 1973 decision in Boris versus Belterre, where it was a 7-2 decision. It was written by William O. Douglas, not exactly a reactionary Supreme Court justice, that upheld Belterre Long Island's limit of 2 unrelated people in the definition of family. So cities certainly have the ability to set a cap on the number of people that constitute a family. And this really took off in the 60s when, as one DuPage County commissioner told me back then, we put a cap on the number of unrelated to keep out those communist communes. Those are her exact words.
So in your experience, there are very few municipalities that don't have some kind of cap.
Right. Now, you should be aware there has been a movement in more jurisdictions that have huge blue majorities to eliminate the definition of family altogether.
Okay.
Oak Park, Illinois, for example, has done that. The housing is so expensive and nobody knows that they eliminated the definition of family, that there has not been a plethora of community residences moving in. And this is in a town that about 10 years ago, one of the village trustees actually met with a operator who wanted to open 2 sober homes next to each other and got him to withdraw his application when they were requiring a special use permit illegally. So they've done quite a turnaround. But otherwise, in general, there's it's just overwhelming. I would say probably 97% or more of the cities have a cap on the number of unrelated that constitute a family.
All right.
That's speculative.
Thank you. Lisa?
This kind of goes off of Maureen's comment. Can we talk about or at least keep on the front of people's minds moving forward with legislation for House Bill 807, how we've changed the patient brokering one sometimes to also include that if they've been arrested for the patient brokering, that then they can't open these mental health houses after. Because, for instance, what happens if you go after these people that are doing these mental health houses who you've already arrested for patient brokering, which is really kind of technically violates what they're not supposed to be doing, and then they're like, but it's a mental health house.
Well, yeah, I know that there are a few people. We meaning the state attorney's office, we don't have any jurisdiction. The court has no jurisdiction over a defendant once the sentence is done. It's not like there's a law that you lose your civil rights if you are a felon and can't possess a firearm.
You can't work in a treatment center or run a sober home.
Well, while somebody's on probation, obviously if they're in prison, but while they're on probation, just about, I think every single defendant in Palm Beach County that was convicted could not work in the field. But once they're off probation, this state and most of the country do not impede somebody from being in a field. Now,
once they're off probation, they can work in a treatment center.
Well, you see, I'm going to move over to ACA, where you can't get licensed in certain regard. So, in other words, if you're talking about somebody who's been convicted of a felony, the law says you can't own or operate a treatment facility, drug treatment facility, or a recovery residence. But my understanding is there are some people that are the force behind whoever the straw person is that's running a place. Um, I hear you. I don't know that it's rampant. I mean, there are a couple of names that came up of people that are no longer on probation and are suspected of being in the business. DCF needs to know this if it's a treatment facility.
I think the screenshots are coming in. Hold on. They're in the chat.
Was you had a screenshot that you're showing us?
I'm not, is having no
Oh.
contacts.
Oh, okay. I don't see any screenshot. We're screen sharing.
Right.
Okay. Well, the upshot is we can't control what somebody does other than what the law says right now. Sounds like you would like there to be a law that once you're convicted of patient brokering, for example, you
I
can't.
mean, of course, that's like a child predator being able to work in a daycare.
Well, Al, can I chime in for just 1 second?
Sure. Who's this? Oh, Michael.
Sorry, it's Michael Schlossman. Yeah. So under 397.47, obviously a level 2 background check is required for all owners, directors, and CFOs. And I believe one of the exceptions to an exemption is the patient brokering statute.
Right. You can't get an exemption if you've been convicted.
Right. So if I'm understanding Lisa, what she's saying is one of the ways they're evading that is by not even applying for FAR certification because they know they won't get it and holding themselves out as a mental health house. Is that correct, Lisa?
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. And of course, this is a residence and not a treatment facility. So there's
Correct.
nobody watching the hen house there. I get it.
That's right. We have no jurisdiction over it right now.
So what should happen in the future is that that this loophole is closed. I hope that FAR explores this to be able to certify dual diagnosed community residences.
Thank you,
But
sir.
yeah, it is a problem. I don't know to what extent it is. And I see Uta, you're raising your hand from Florida Behavioral Health. Well, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Al. I have a question. If we know that people are engaging in patient brokering, regardless of license or anything else, is that not a crime that should be investigated and prosecuted?
Yes, but what Lissa brought up is not engaging in patient brokering. It's being in the industry at all. That these people have previously been convicted of patient brokering. And now, as Michael said, they're flying under the radar by having a home that there's no licenses, no governmental entity that licenses a quote unquote mental health residence where no treatment. It's not an ACA situation. Does that answer your question, Uta? If there's brokering, that's a different.
I'm just looking at the screenshots, and they're holding themselves out to be transitional, and there are actually licenses for that under ACA. So I wonder if it falls under unlicensed activity.
It may. I mean, anything that we can do. I mean, your suggestions, send them to me. If Alyssa, if you have information, we'll still look at it. We no longer have investigators from other agencies, so there's a limit to what we can do at this point. But we are still monitoring the hotline, and we're still, Ted Paddock is still hard at work. If there is evidence, we can go to the jurisdiction, and we can talk to a detective in the jurisdiction. I think, I don't think that that the patient brokering issue is there. Operating without a license, perhaps, but I would imagine that ACA or DCF should be taking the lead on a complaint. And with DCF and ACA, they're going to have websites that will be very transparent as to how they investigate their complaints. So hopefully that'll help. Michael, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to sort of make a distinction between this issue, which is a very big issue, and FAR's been working on this for some time, and there is a pathway to start providing certifications for mental health providers. So I wanted to make a distinction between that and what my concern was in this bill which Dan alleviated, that there was a clause in here that if there was no license or certification offered, that would be an exemption to this. But the way Dan explained it makes sense, and it actually makes it harder for them to stay in business, because hopefully one of the benefits of all this plus the legislation from last year, is that the municipalities are now on their game. And they've been calling FAR regularly to discuss the reasonable accommodation requirements that they're all required now to draft into ordinances. And the same thing would happen with this. So they're a lot more cognizant of these homes that are in their municipalities now, and they're starting to really tighten up enforcement, because we can suspend and revoke all day, but without their code enforcement or planning and zoning, there's really nothing that we can do. So, so there is a really good benefit to all of this, and I do agree with that. And FAR is very supportive of those provisions specifically.
Okay. I noticed that Alex from Project Overdose was mentioned. Yeah, he and I are on speed dial. I don't know that they, well, I don't know that this is in their wheelhouse, but I can talk to them about this as well. Okay, yeah, this is a thorny problem. I always say whenever we have legislation, somebody's going to try to find a loophole to drive a truck through, and that's what we're experiencing right now. I don't know the extent, Michael, and do you? I mean, I know I'm not asking to name names. I don't want names named, but I would imagine that your FAR would have some kind of a handle. And Lissa, your boots on the ground there in South County, how many places are we talking about? Is this, you remember back in the Delray Wild West days when the homily was you couldn't throw a stone without hitting the sober home. Are we talking a dozen? Are we talking 6? Are we talking 3? What are we talking about? I mean, so, that is another thing that we need to consider. How big of a problem is this right now? It's a problem if there's even one, but what's
It's huge because a lot of the people that didn't get arrested, statute of limitations have ran for a lot of the things that they did from 2016 to, I mean,
well, I'm not talking about the ownership. I'm talking about the actual loophole that Michael's talking about and that you're talking about, which is calling themselves quote unquote a mental health community residence.
there's a lot of them.
There's a limit to how
Not
far.
in Delray, but
I mean, are we talking about 2 dozen? Are we talking about 3?
at least 2 dozen.
2 dozen in Delray alone?
No, not in Delray.
Okay, but just in South County? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is a
I'd say
problem.
more Lake Worth, Boynton, Riviera.
Okay. All right, Susan, you forgot your hand up.
I just wanted to mention for anybody who knows of these places, it's still worth reporting them to FAR because we are trying to see if there's anything we can do in the moment about it. And some of them are doing both. So FAR will investigate these. And of course, it may also be a resource for get a better handle on how many are out there because we can't know what we don't know. So my sense is with Lissa, I think there's a fair amount of them, but could I tell you exactly? I couldn't. And so that's part of the issue is identifying them and trying to figure out, what else we can do. Because we've certainly, as far as had experience with people who are saying they're doing both and that kind of thing, because they need FAR certification for other reasons. And that's been a problem as well. So we really want to have a handle on how many there are. So that would be very helpful for anyone who knows.
Yeah, unfortunately, DCF would not be a proper avenue to complain because these are residences and there's no treatment at these residences. And ACA probably would say the same thing, which is part of the loophole. Part of the problem is that there now are no eyes on them. But it's all the more reason why 419 needs to be passed. Because if we have 419 and they're not licensed, they are going to have to go through a municipal process of reasonable accommodation to show that they have the safeguards and the safety to protect the residents in the house. So it's not like they just get rubber stamped. Now they're going to be scofflaws in terms of zoning. And so this legislation will do something to help that issue. It's a collateral success from having this be the floor for zoning in the state. Now, for those of you who may have joined us since the first 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour, there haven't been very many questions or comments. There have been a few regarding the legislation itself. We have a meeting next week on the 17th where we have other matters on the agenda with DCF's new website and some other things, including updates from FAR and Oxford and stats. So, right now it's kind of like a free-for-all where we're just talking about, I'm trying to bring it back to 419, but we're talking about some of the issues out there that are still a problem. And one of them is this hybrid behavioral health house that doesn't have treatment, acts like a community residence, but is not capable of being licensed or is not required to be licensed necessarily because there's no mental health community residence governmental entity that licenses that particular type of residence. Did I say it right, Michael? Is that pretty much it?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a free-for-all. I'll keep it open as long as anybody has any questions about 419 or something to look to. Some of our conversation is in support, like I said, of 419, because it will solve this. It should solve to a great degree this problem of running under the radar, saying I'm a mental health residence and not a substance use disorder recovery residence. Okay. Any other comments out there? No hands. Hey, I told you this would be a very short meeting. Again, please think about various groups that can be rallied to support this legislation. It's in staff writing right now. It will be filed. Gail Harrell will file it in the Senate once it comes out, and we can work it out with staff as to the language. And then what we need is support. Okay. Hey, thank you all very much. We'll see you on next, Wednesday the 17th? Is it a week from today or is it Thursday? I'm confused. But the 17th at 1 o'clock, we've got some good things on the agenda. I'm very, very happy about the new website that's being rolled out by DCF. User-friendly, a lot of information on there. Maybe even a star system, but I don't know if they can achieve that. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the week and a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.